experience with us. And of course, we try to do it, like I said, in a very informal way where everyone gets to enjoy what's being shared and, of course, what's being passed across. And today's episode is not going to be an exception. We're discussing another very interesting topic, which is on dark patterns, art of deception by design. For those who don't have an idea about what dark pattern is, we'll get into the art of the discussion today. And of course, like I said, we've got a really amazing line of panelists that will be helping us get into that and make us understand what dark pattern is. Dark pattern is something we all see every day, but we don't pay enough attention to it. And these are part of the things that also creates not just harm, but the fact that people do what they don't want to do at the end of the day. So I believe by the end of this session, we'll have a very fair understanding of what this means, how this affects us, and why we should be on the lookout for it. And finally, things we can do around making sure we're not victim of dark patterns. So to get it started today, we'll start with an introduction of my panelists today. And again, like I said, I have really amazing set of panelists here today. And it's so interesting and so fascinating for me to, for those who have followed Bar and Bands very well, Victoria Olon is a usual guest, and I'm so excited to let us know she's back. So I'm going to start with you, Victoria. Victoria, say hello to everyone, please. Please introduce yourself. Yeah. Hi, Victoria, can you hear me? I don't know if I'm the only one struggling to hear you. I don't know if anyone else can hear Victoria.
I can hear her too.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right. I just wanted to be sure. Okay. I don't know why we can't hear Victoria, but I'll probably come back to that. She'll do our introduction pretty much later. So Kelechi, over to you, please.
Was it because I responded to you that you had to call my name?
Yeah. So go ahead, please.
Okay. Introductions. Kelechi here. Context of this conversation, I'm a product manager, and I love my job. Yeah, I'm also a lawyer as well. So yeah, in between the two.
Okay. Thank you, Kelechi. Amanda. Amanda, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry, so you missed that whole first part. I'm Amanda Manyame. I'm a digital law and rights consultant. I work at the intersection of tech and law. Like Kelechi, in a past life, I worked in a law firm. I was a lawyer at some point, and now I work at the intersection of technology and law, and I advise a number of stakeholders, from CSOs to private sector to regulators to your policy makers, from a global as well as a regional perspective. And I'm looking forward to having a chat with everyone on the panel because everyone is just amazing. Thank you so much, Ridwan.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Uche, over to you, please.
Thanks, Ridwan. Hi, everyone. My name is Uche Chukwonyeka. I am a product designer working in product strategy, visual design, and overall shaping digital experiences. I have had the opportunity to work across over at least 10 different spaces, some in and out of Africa. I generally just believe in falling in love with a problem is essential in creating best solutions for people. And I apply the same principles to help teams design data-informed products and essentially achieve business goals for a better human experience.
All right. Thank you, Uche. Victoria, can you try now?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Finally, we can hear you.
I had to leave and join again. Hi, I'm Victoria. I've listened to everyone's profile and I really don't know what to say. So, okay, it's great to be back here. I'm into data protection, privacy, the legal aspects generally, and I'm just here to learn from the wealth of knowledge of everybody we have on the panel, basically.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you very much. Okay. Mohammed, I can see you're raising your hand. I don't know. Do you want to? I'm wondering if. Can you drop a chat in the box, Mohammed, if you probably want to say something, or if you intend to speak, let me know as well. All right. So to start the conversation today, I think it's probably what's the right thing to do would be to give us some sort of background. So sometimes last year, I know I reached out to Amanda, and we had this interesting conversation around dark patterns and why it's actually important for us to actually do a research around that space. And at the end of the day, what we did was we looked at a couple of products within Africa and also targeting the African markets. And we did a number of analysis to see some of these products, which of them have or embeds what we call dark patterns into their design process of those products. So we're going to share the findings, our findings contained in the research, in the report that we did. I'm going to share that pretty much later. But to get some set of background, Uche, I'm going to start with you. And that's also because yourself, you design products, you've supported organizations, building products and all of this. So breaking it down to be as simple as possible. What's dark pattern? What's dark pattern? When I look at the products, can I spot it? Can I see it? And we're going to get into the different ways they manifest and all of that pretty much later. But I want you to setting the background and setting the tone for this conversation. What is dark pattern, or what are dark patterns, and how can we? Yeah. So thanks.
So just in a very simple way, good user experience design is about providing the users with seamless, enjoyable interactions with their products, right? And it's essentially supposed to have the user's best interest in mind. And it's not deceptive or sneaky in nature, right? But then these experiences are supposed to be created by various design practices, right? After studying and learning more about the user, right? And this approach can make a product stand out and provide good results for the businesses, right? Or in some situations, these approach can be used to manipulate the user and trick them into making decisions that aren't necessarily good for them, but benefits the company, right? That's the main difference. And the later practice is what we determine dark patterns, right? Dark patterns essentially presents the user with crafty interface that tricks users into doing things that they may not otherwise do. Yeah, that's the most simple way that I can put it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come back to you pretty much later. Amanda, I'm coming to you right now. And what I want you to do is part of laying the background to understanding what dark patterns are or what dark pattern is. I want you to give me some sort of, or just share what you think. What are the, what are the dangers inherent in dark pattern? Why is it so scary? Why are we even talking about it in the first place?
That's a very good question. I would say why it's important, why it is sometimes scary, and why we need to understand what it is because have you noticed that sometimes you sign on for a product, for a mailing list, for your gym membership, but now when you want to unsubscribe or not get that information anymore or not be a member of that gym, it is so difficult to find that button where it says unsubscribe, or if you find that it takes you to 10 other pages and so on and so forth. So the reason why it's important for us to understand it and why it's also scary is because as consumers, we are signing on for products and we're giving away our personal information when we sign on for those products. But it becomes very hard for us to unsubscribe or to not take back our information, to now tell this particular gym or this platform that I no longer want you to have my information. I no longer want you to send me information. Just keep me off, stop sending me these emails, or I don't want to be part of your gym anymore. How do I, now get off this particular train that I have gotten myself onto? Yes, it was a choice initially, but as I think a lot of people have talked about in the recent past, when you look at a lot of data protection laws, they give you as a user the right to tell the person you're giving your information that I no longer want you to have it. So dark patterns, some of them make it a lot harder for us to exercise that particular right. So I think that's just one example I can give, Ridwan, without going on and on. You're muted,
Okay.
Ridwan.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for that good introduction. So, Kelechi, I'm going to come to you right now. You're a product manager, and part of what you do, your day-to-day job, is also to make sure the product is not just market fit, but also to serve the consumers or to serve the users in the best way. So, and without taking too much, can you just maybe about 2 or 3, and I'm going to make this go round. Can you just give like examples of how dark patterns, how they manifest? Kelechi, you're mute.
Hi, sorry. I didn't get your question.
All right, so I'm saying like from your own experience being a product manager, and which of course what you do is also ensuring not only is the product market fit, but also can also do a lot of good to the user and the consumer, for example. So I'm saying if you can just maybe like 2, 3 examples, if you can describe the ways in which dark patterns in which they manifest, just like 2 or 3 examples. Yeah.
Okay. So now let me go back to the reference that Amanda made. How users get to subscribe for a particular product, but then eventually you can't unsubscribe. So that is one way it manifests, where it's either that the unsubscribe button, for instance, is so hidden that you get too tired to even want to unsubscribe, or it's not even there at all, right? Or even where we get to collect your details. For instance, the product collects your details, and then the point being that they now ask you, if you don't want them to have your details anymore, right, you should, press this button or press this button. And when you try to do that, you just see unnecessary ads, popping up so much that you get really frustrated, and you don't want to unsubscribe, because just like, okay, it's not worth it, or the stress of trying to subscribe or not have them on, them not having you on their list anymore is so stressful that you just prefer to just keep having them, and then just keep deleting the mails or whatever that happens. So those are like 2 ways in which dark patterns could manifest, at least from this perspective.
Thank you, Kelechi. Uche, okay. do you want to add to that, please?
Yes. So those are actually really great examples, right? And there are other, couple of examples, right, surrounding things like e-commerce, for example, where you're trying to purchase something, but somewhere along the purchasing journey, the site sneaks in an additional item into your basket, often hidden through like an option of opting out for that advisory item, like buying a domain name, and you end up having to pay for things like SEO practices and Google search results and all of these other things that you actually didn't budget for, right? But at the end of the day, you find yourself having to pay for this thing without even, consenting to it, right? And there are lots of other examples that relate to, you giving your consent to a few things. For example, companies hiding some things in like terms and conditions because they know that not a lot of people are going to read, terms and conditions of specific products, right? So it generally revolves around, you forfeiting, rights to something that you own, your data, your consent, your money, and it affects you in various ways, right? And that's why we're trying to talk about it.
Thank you, Uche. Amanda, do you want to share more examples with us?
Yes, Uche, thank you for that one where you now just see things when you're trying to buy something and you see extra things right at the end, like tax. I have fallen prey to that so many times and I kick myself in the foot because you would have had a budget. But anyway, the other one is it's sometimes hard to, they make it easy for you to find information on how to get onto their particular platform. So it might be like a very big green button or something. And then everything else, the terms and conditions, everything else that's actually very important is either in very small text or it's a duller color. So it makes it a little bit more difficult to find, or you can see it, but it doesn't necessarily catch your eye. So you end up just going ahead with these are the steps that I need to go for, but you don't manage to read the T's and C's or anything else that's particularly important. Thanks, Ridwan.
All right. Thank you very much, Amanda. Other ways in which we can see this is it goes on from signing up to those mailing lists, using a website, signing up for free trials, for example, where it's so difficult for you to even cancel or to remove your card. Also, you could include scenarios where even games where you have something giving you nudge to play by appointment or something giving you some sort of daily reward, or even things around artificial scarcity. You're trying to book a flight, maybe on a flight aggregator, for example, or maybe you're even trying to book an hotel, and they're telling you right there that there are just about 4 left. You have scenarios where they give you examples like 50 people are looking at this at the same time. So which could, nudge you to want to pay for that thing. And I think another very terrific example would be the bullying part. These are examples where you see things like where you are literally shamed to buy something, and if you allow that get into you, you might probably be forced into buying. They use some sort of negative phrasing. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And people fall victim of that. Victoria, I want to ask you now. Have you seen examples of this from your own use of products, whether it's trying to, or if you've been a victim yourself? And I'm also throwing this open. If there's anyone who has been a victim of any manifestation of dark patterns, they can share with us in the chat button, or just raise their hand so they can share the experience with us.
Hi everyone. Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'll just give like 2 examples I'm very particular about. There was one time when I open websites and I see a cookie banner that gives me options to like turn off cookies and all that, I always open them. So I opened this one and I was like, what really is the point? There was no difference between turning on and turning off. Like the color remains the same. You don't know if you have to turn it right or turn it left because there's no difference. So in the end, you are just like confused that have I turned it off or did I turn it on? There was no opt-in, opt-out. It was just this circular button that was gray. That whether you put it left or right, it still remained gray. So it was just like you don't have a choice. You don't know what we are doing here, and we're going to leave it that way anyway. That was what they were trying to like tell their users, or the people that write privacy notices in like very horrible fonts, so that once you open it, you are like, no way, I'm not reading this. This will give me a headache. Or people that put it at the bottom of the page in like reflect in this see-through way that you almost miss it completely. or there's this app that shows that maybe 1,500,000 and something people shared this, and every second the figure keeps rising. I'm like, how many people are there in the world, and how many people are online now that the figure keeps going up and up and up every second? In fact, you see dark patterns everywhere. There's almost no website you check that you don't see something that is like tricking you into doing something you would ordinarily not do if the design was normal or right, or if it wasn't intentionally put there to throw you off.
Thank you, Victoria, for that. Thank you very much for that. Again, I'm throwing this open. Does anyone who is there listening, if you want to share your experience with dark patterns, you can either send that through a chat or just raise your hand, please. So, Uche, I'm going to come to you quickly. And I know that, I mean, some that manifest in ways where you're trying to cancel some subscription, for example, and they make it so difficult either to delete your account or to even cancel your subscription. I mean, how do you react to that?
I mean, that's also one of the, like, it's one of the most popular ones that everybody has talked about here, around situations where you get so frustrated and sometimes you end up not even doing what you set out to do. You know, it's what they call like roach motor, right? You try to, and it comes in like subscriptions, accounts. You could even like create your account and you try to delete your account. There are so many platforms that I use and I don't even know how to delete my accounts, right? Because I end up not needing them anymore. And, you know, it's just there. Like, there's really nothing I can do about it. Sometimes you try to, I mean, I try to contact, let's say, like the customer care account or contact the info@whatever.com and, you know, try to get them to assist me in, you know, deleting my account or removing my subscription. And you find out that you're put in such a frustrating loop and you end up just not, you either end up being so frustrated that you just give up, or you have such a horrible experience and you know, they try to convince you to, you know, keep your account, you know, or try to sell you into, you know, agreeing that what you're trying to do is not needed. So that has been my experience with that particular dark pattern there, roach motor. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Uche. We're currently running a poll. You can just check sli.do or slido.com. I'm using this code M179. There's a poll currently running. I would like to hear from you about what your experience has been like. All right. Moving on from that, we've talked about why some of the manifestations of dark patterns and all sorts. So Amanda, I'm going to come to you now. What's the legal framework, if there is any at all, around the issue of dark pattern? Increasingly across the world, we're beginning to see some laws or legislation specifically mentioning it and expressly prohibiting it. So in Africa, or in so many African countries, and let's localizing the conversation right now, the best we have is we have some sort of data protection laws on this side, consumer protection law on this side, maybe electronic transaction law on this side. These laws as they are they sufficient in protecting consumers against the use of dark patterns, or do they grant some sort of succor to consumers? And generally, what's the legal framework around these subjects?
As rightly mentioned, we're seeing countries such as the US. They last year, I believe, or the year before last, they were looking at coming up with a law. It would be a federal law, meaning it would cover all the federal states in the US, and it would provide for dark patterns specifically, or the deceptiveness of marketing strategies. But as you've rightly mentioned, it's not something that is that has really caught on to a lot of countries. So what we have on the continent at the moment is mostly consumer protection laws. And consumer protection laws generally provide for the protection of consumers offline as well as online in some countries. You might also have some electronic transaction laws that provide some consumer protection provisions. And then you also have, like you mentioned, data protection laws, because they provide for the use of your personal data online. So is this enough? No, it is not enough. I believe that our laws have to be broad enough to cover each and every harm or possible harm that can befall consumers. But at the same time, they need to be specific. So if we're not specifically targeting the fact that I can now not withdraw my information, or I now need to unsubscribe to something, or as Victoria mentioned, I can't even tell, have I said, yes, I want all the cookies. No, I don't want the cookies. I just want average cookies. As a consumer, you're still left wondering, what exactly have I accepted to, or I'm trying to get off, or why do I now have all these extra costs in my basket at checkout, when in all honesty, all I actually wanted was that one item for that particular price. Why am I being peer pressured, into all of these things? But the current laws don't specifically provide for that. And if they don't specifically provide for it, they're not necessarily protecting consumers against it. And this would be the consumer who's consistently online. Now let's bear in mind someone who's possibly in a more remote area where things such as internet, Wi-Fi are not as easy to get. And it's not always easy for them to be able to access certain services, or to even book a flight, or to maybe get basic or essential needs that they might need to be able to do so online. And we saw that last year and this year with COVID, that a lot of people have had to go online and make use of online products. So if you're not protecting the everyday person that is not always necessarily understanding what is happening online, and the fact that now you need to read everything that's in small print, naturally, as a person, you're always going to look at what's in the big print. You're not going to look at the finer print. So those are things that need to be provided for specifically. I think our laws need to go so far as to say, do not deceive your consumers in any way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amanda. Victoria, I'm going to come to you on your own reaction on the legal framework. But before that, Kelechi and Uche, I'm going to throw this to you because you are like the product. You are like the products. You're the products person here. So there's been conversation around company having its own interest, and that the design of those products are like the deception embedded in the design process itself is deliberate on the part of the company. There's been some argument that no, it's the designers that should be responsible for how those things turn out. So I'm saying this now, putting this out. It's going to be, two questions. But the first component of the question is: should designers take responsibility for bad designs? Kelechi, I want to hear from you first. And being a product manager yourself, is this one of the things you look out for before you go public with a product?
Okay. So the first question: should designers be responsible for bad designs? I'll see that on two perspectives, right? Because in that sense, like, the employee be responsible for whatever he or she does, right? Because design cannot go out except, there is like that approval from the stakeholders or from those that call the shots in the company. So it just means that for anything that goes out of the company, bad design or not, it means there's an approval one way or the other. Professionally, yes, personally, designer can take responsibility, but on a larger scale of things, it's the company itself that takes responsibility for such. So in the event where we see dark patterns, and even from bad design, I think that it is the company that should be held responsible for whatever action, because it's like the employer taking liability for the actions of the employee. So that's like how I see it. And then I think the other question that you asked about, if we look out for these things, of course, Of course, yes, we do. We're able to, but then in the eventuality where you see such things come out, right, where it leaves the head, it leaves brainstorming, it leaves ideation, and it translates from ideation to being the design and being embedded in the product. I see it as a form of intentionality. Some companies can claim, ignorance on that end. Oh, they didn't know that this, they didn't know that, but that's like where you do your due diligence. So if such acts or such activities should be out in the open where consumers or users are able to engage with it, there is like some form of intentionality where everyone involved in that chain of action should be held responsibility for it. That's the way I see it anyways.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, which is in your experience as a product manager, have you had to deal with something like this? Like you send it back to the design team, like, I don't want to see this because I feel this might be deceptive. And how has that feedback? If the answer is yes, if you've had to deal with a scenario like that or more scenarios like that, what's been the feedback from the design team? Is it scorn? Is it acceptance to fix up, or more like you don't understand this? What's been the reaction?
Okay, so personally, I haven't had that kind of experience, right? Because I am always involved in what's going on. So even before, there's always for me, in my experience, there's like a reason for everything. So this is like why we have this. This is like why we need to have this here. This is like why this needs to be visible and not hidden. So I haven't had the experience where, of course, there are times where the designers want to make a particular button gray because it fits in the colors and all that stuff. But having to explain to them that this is us being diligent, this is us being compliant, this is why this has to be there. So I haven't had the experience of the back and forth with my design team so far. So we're always on the same page on, oh, this has to be there for this reason, and we have to be compliant one way or the other. All
right, thank you. Uche, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I actually agree with Kelechi, right? Because the natural conclusion that many people like to take is that we look to designers with this discussion, right? Because they essentially operate at the intersection of users and business needs, right? So people feel like they have the power to keep both sides in balance, and they should. But people are starting to encourage designers to actually push back on some of their OKRs, right, and speak against these features that don't align with their values, right? The general public tend to paint designers as referees, right? But I like to say that designers are not essentially the referees in the tug of war between users and business needs. We are actually the rope, right? And we're the ones that are being pulled between what to design for users' needs and what to design for business needs, right? But then a good example that I like to give is, sometimes these dark patterns go beyond the scope of just designers. So for example, if you look at, say, the sneak into baskets practice, right? Imagine a company that, let's say an e-commerce company or an e-commerce company that is, focused on selling a particular type of product, right? And say in one of their ideation sessions, they introduce, a new type of product that they're trying to market and they're trying to push into the market, right? So this is a new product, right? So obviously the number one business goal is to get this product out there, and is to get people to buy it, and is to get people to, subscribe to this new innovative thing that they've introduced, right? So say, for example, it's a company that sells shoes. And this new product that they've introduced is a new small bag that you can put your cute shoes in, right? It's not too expensive, but it's not free, right? So they figured that it can be like a sneak into basket add-on to people who buy shoes, right? So they want to add this bag to your cart, right? So the designers have obviously designed the platform in the way that you're used to, right? So you come on the line, you buy your shoes, but then when you get to your cart, you realize that they've added this bag to you, right? Some people see it, some people don't. So in those situations, the way it goes is, and this is just in my experience, right? It starts from the top, right? Where those innovations are happening, where the conversations are happening, right? And they put pressure to people like the marketing managers, right? To sell these things, right? Because they're looking at numbers and they're quantifying impacts, right? So in places where marketing fails, you try the sneak in the basket method, right? And we're looking at product managers, and you're trying to quantify these OKRs and you're trying to quantify conversion rates, right? So with the sneak into basket, of course, you're going to see short-term conversion rates, right? But in that scenario, when people eventually realize that they are getting charged more for things that they don't want, or things that they don't want to buy, or things that they didn't plan to buy, right? What happens is it goes around, right? You start getting more complaints. Your company's PR starts to take a hit. People are going online and they're dragging your company as per this company is cheating us and they're putting things in our basket and they're charging us more for things that I don't even know about. Customer care starts to take a hit as well because they notice that they're getting so many phone calls of people asking them, what's this bag? What's this thing that I paid for? I didn't plan to pay for this. And, eventually people want to start returning those items, right? And if you look at some of these things, the price of returning an item like that could even be more than the price of selling it, right? Because you have to repackage it and you have to think of repairs and you have to think of all of those things, right? And then you also have to invest into mitigating your PR that's already going down, right? And at the end of the day, right, in the long term, it's a burden that the company at large has to bear, right? Because there are all of these sectors that eventually get affected by, in the long term, they get affected by the use of dark patterns, right? So it's a company that is a pain that the company has to bear at the end of the day. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Uche. I mean, and you actually have answered a question I would have loved to ask pretty much later. That's around what's the cost for using dark patterns on businesses. And thank you very much for shedding light on that. So Victoria, I'm coming back to you now. So the question was, what's the legal framework, and is the legal framework, is it sufficient as we have it? You're muted, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Within the Nigerian context, the legal framework is roughly insufficient. Like, it's not something that we even hear of a lot of times. It's just we hear it here and there, here and there. You can look at the FCCPA and you see a few things that touch on it, description of goods, things like that. But nobody just addresses dark patterns in the law, like we see the US is trying to do now, and some other countries. But back in Nigeria, even the NDPR, probably because it's really small, the FCCPA doesn't really address dark patterns. There are provisions here and there about goods description, customers' right of choice, and things like that. But it does not consider or anticipate dark patterns particularly. So I think we need a more robust framework to cover it, especially within the Nigerian context.
Okay.
Am I talking to myself? I think I'm talking to myself.
Oh, I can hear you. Really, when are you still there?
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Victoria. So, before we go to the next question, the Mythbusters is up, please. Victoria.
Only criminals have to worry about online privacy. Notice, like, something we hear all the time. It's the brother of I have nothing to hide, so I'm not worried about privacy. Like, I have nothing to hide. I'm fine. What am I doing on the internet? I'm not a criminal. I'm not a Yahoo boy. I'm not doing anything illegal. I don't even download music illegally. So privacy is for shady people who have things to hide. But it's not true. For example, if there's a data breach somewhere and your data is taken up or stolen by an identity thief, does the identity thief say, oh, who is the criminal here? Who is not the criminal? I'm only stealing the data of shady people and I'm only going to steal the identity of shady people. No, everybody needs to be concerned because data breaches don't pick people who are bad out of the whole lot of people everywhere. Everybody should be concerned about their privacy, because privacy is bigger than I'm hiding something, I'm not hiding something. For example, why do you lock your toilet door? It's something we always ask, even when you are alone in the house. It's just natural instinct. Why do you have curtains? Why don't you just leave your windows open? Why are you hiding? Are you a criminal? Why do you lock your door? Things like that. Just privacy doesn't only have to do with, oh, someone is a criminal, someone is not a criminal. It's a common misconception that individuals who engage in suspicious or criminal behavior online are the only people who have to worry about privacy. Privacy, however, is a universal concern. Just because you have nothing to hide doesn't mean you are invulnerable to privacy breaches, because you are a saint, the one perfect person in the whole world. When they attack Facebook, if you have a Facebook account, your data is going to be stolen. Whether or not you are good or bad, it's not really important whether you have something to hide or not. We all should be concerned. Number one, it's a human right, just like right to life. You don't question someone's right to dignity of persons. Why is privacy the exception? You say, okay, I have nowhere to go, so my right to freedom of movement should be taken away. No, I remember how people went almost crazy when they said they shouldn't leave their houses during the pandemic. People like me that don't go anywhere, who are still complaining that why want to go out. I have nowhere to go. I don't go anywhere, basically. I like staying at home. But that doesn't give anybody the right to take away my right to freedom of movement. So privacy should not be an exception. Whether or not you have something to hide, you should be concerned about your privacy.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria, for doing that. So I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to come to you now, Amanda. And I know we've talked about the legal framework and inadequacy, or how inadequate the existing legal framework is as we know it. So the next question I'm going to ask you is, I know you've given us a bit of perspective into how some of this nudging, this psychological manipulation could actually hurt us as users from a consumer, from an economic point of view. But there are also different manifestation of dark patterns that also give rise to data protection issues, such that users end up giving up more data than they should ordinarily do, and more data than it's actually necessary for the business transaction, for example, or the use of the services that they are trying to use. And in that situation, we see things like data minimization being violated and all of that. I mean, what's your take on that, especially when dark pattern intersects with data protection?
That's a very good question. When dark patterns intersect with data protection, the challenge is you might end up, or I won't even say might, I have given more information than I should. And an example is, let's say you have a new device and you're setting it up. It will ask you, do you want to send the diagnostic information to the developer of the particular device? They don't necessarily tell you what information you're sending. Even if they did, I possibly wouldn't know it. And I just say yes. So your options are yes and no. So in terms of data protection laws, you're supposed to allow me to make an informed decision. So I'm supposed to know what I'm saying yes to. I'm supposed to know what I'm saying no to. I'm supposed to understand it. It should be told to me in a way that is very easy to understand. But when you just say, do you want to send this information? In my mind, I think, well, it's going to help the developer make the product better. So I'll just say yes. But I really have no idea how much information I am sharing at this point. This could be information regarding my use of the device. So what times do I use it? Do I use it in the mornings? Do I use it mostly late at night? Do I use it only during the day? Also, my location, it might give away, not all the time, but sometimes it gives away my location. So the challenge with giving away all these small bits and pieces of information is it doesn't seem big, because you're saying, well, it's just the time that I'm using the device. So it really doesn't matter. As Victoria said, I've got nothing to hide. But the reality is, if you put all this information together with Victoria's information, Ridwan's information, everyone else's information, it tells things. It'll tell this developer that this particular person is possibly a mother. Why? Because they only really use their device after 8 o'clock, when that's when children are usually in bed. This person maybe does not work, or they work at home because of when you frequent certain places, or when you're using your device, or so on and so forth. So in addition to giving away information that you would have given away, you're also giving away information that you didn't intend to give away, because you might not want Apple to know that you currently do not have a job, or you currently work from home, or you currently go to the gym at this time and not at that time. And then now you're also giving away your health information. You're giving away so much information. And that definitely goes firstly against the data minimization principle, because a data controller is only supposed to have information that they need for the particular use. So now here you're giving above and beyond for the particular use. Secondly, you're supposed to give informed consent. As a user, I can tell you, even though I know these things, there are a lot of times the consent I've given is not informed, because I really don't know what I'm saying yes or what I'm saying no to. So that's already, if you look at it, two principles that are not being adhered to when you look at when we have dark patterns. There are a lot more principles, and there are a lot more issues when you go more in depth into it. And as you've said, it's not only from I want to protect my right of privacy, but the reason why we have data protection, why we have the right to privacy, is because we're trying to protect our dignity. And our dignity is one of those human rights that is very important. So if you can't protect your privacy, in all likelihood, you're also not going to be able to protect your dignity. And I believe a lot of us want to protect that. That's why we have curtains in our houses. That's why we don't want to share certain information. So in the same breath, we don't want to share so much information with the particular services that we have signed on for, because some of this information, and I will talk about period apps, and that's something that Privacy International has really looked at. And as a woman, you're sharing so much personal. It's very personal. It's something that is very personal. We don't talk about it even amongst women, but you're sharing it with a particular service provider because you want to have a period calendar. And that information is really tethered to our dignity as women, but it's information that we're freely sharing. And sometimes we don't know who it's going to be shared with. Sometimes we're giving away more than we would want to give away. So it's very important that developers and service providers are more cognizant of the fact that, yes, they want to sell a product. Yes, I want the product to work well, but at the same time, we need to consider that there are human rights that need to be protected at all times. And I put that on developers, I put that on companies, because you're the ones that are giving out products to consumers. So it is your burden. As the UN, they're developing a treaty at the moment, but they have standards that require companies to, in as much as they want business, they have to adhere to the human rights, and data protection is just one of those rights that they have to adhere to.
Thank you, Amanda, for that very in-depth insight. Victoria, I'm going to come to you quickly now. I mean, I like that Amanda mentioned the period tracking app, which is also a research that we did last year, also in collaboration with TechAbout. And what we found was really helpful. How people don't. I mean, why are you tracking people's period app? Why are you tracking people's? It's the same case for also mental health app as well. These are like, I mean, these are not things that I think people should commodify. That's what I think. But also, in our research early this year, also in the digital lending space, that's also a recurrent theme that we found. In fact, another form of dark pattern that is very pervasive in the digital lending space is when companies get people to give positive reviews about a product. And I don't know whether you've seen that before. I mean, virtually everyone before buying a product on e-commerce site or downloading an app, you probably go see reviews first, and you see a lot of positive reviews. But for the digital lending apps that we saw people who made reviews, and first, the name didn't really sound like names that comes from this part of the world. Why that might not be an objective way to see things, but you saw things going as far as saying, you saw people going as far as making comment like, oh, this app is the best. I was able to get a loan of $10,000. Or making reference to some other currencies that are actually not relevant to, I mean, the local context here. Then there you begin to want, and there are so many of them, racking up approval rating that it's huge, just to like give some sort of succor or confidence to whoever it is that intends to download such app. So also, we've seen this product being designed where, okay, I think that question should go to Kelechi and Uche. But Victoria, I want your quick reaction on the intersection of data protection and dark pattern.
Yes. I was saying, like, I dropped the message on the chat box about how dark patterns can interfere with informed consent, because you are not sure about what you are touching, or you are not touching, what you are clicking on. You don't even know what exactly about the reviews. And I see positive reviews. I see it as a red flag. Well, when me and my sister were going through, to be like, oh, they're probably paying this for, they got their employees to give them good reviews. I don't know why I do that, but I see it as a red flag, not as a good thing or a good reason to buy products. But back to data protection and dark patterns, it interferes with informed consent. Consent has some policy. It must be explicit. It cannot be implied. It must be specific. It must be informed, unambiguous, things like that. Now, when you are tricking people into giving consent, yes, I consent. Like, for example, for my banking app now, they have this data protection. They wrote data privacy pop up every time you open the app, and there is yes, I consent. Then there's a tiny cancel under it. Yes, I consent is bigger and orange, like very bright, and the other one you almost don't see it. So I consent, but it's unclear. It's like I've been tricked into consenting because I can't even see the other option. So it takes away that right to choose, the right to object to consent, to processing. My choice is not particularly informed. Or if I don't know if my cookie button is on yes or no, or if I have to opt out or opt-in, because they do it with opting out and opting in. So you don't even know if you're opting in or opting out, but you are just pressing something. All these things interfere with the rights of data subjects, and companies can get, if we're in part of the world where regulators, should I say this, take their job seriously, some of these organizations would have a lot to deal with on the legal aspect, like with data protection regulations, because dark patterns are not just design problems. They create real life data protection problems that we need to address.
All right. Thank you very much, Victoria. Amanda, you have your hand raised. Do you want to say something quickly?
Yes.
Go on, please.
Yes, quickly. So Victoria, as you've mentioned, when you have that yes, I consent, and then the no, I don't consent. One day I decided, let me just say no, I don't consent, because I wanted to see, can I still then read the particular article I wanted to read? I said, no, I don't consent, and I was still allowed to actually read. So I don't know if they were still tracking me or they were still using those particular cookies or not. But it's worth trying, and maybe if a lot of us say no, we don't consent, maybe at some point, developers such as Uche, they'll stop using these tracking cookies. Thanks, Ridwan.
I'm sure Uche will deny the allegation. Anyways, Uche, I'm going to come to you right now, and I want Kelechi's reaction on that as well. So, I mean, according to so many of these operating OS, Android, Apple, F-Droid, whatever name it is, they all have like the developer rules. And I know for Google, one of the rules or one of the developer rules is that they made a categorization of permissions that are allowed on mobile apps, for example, and they flag some as dangerous. So things like find location, coerce location, access to media, capability to read SMS, read emails, listen to audio and stuff like that, they are considered to be dangerous permissions. And the typical thing or the rule is that if you're using any permission that is considered to be dangerous, you need to get the approval, which is literally consent of the mobile phone user. So we've seen products where all of these things are not, I mean, these permissions are somehow used and data get exchanged with third parties. We've also seen fingerprinting on websites, for example, where there are various tracking technologies being used to profile people, third-party cookies and all sorts. But in reaction to this, now we're seeing Apple say, oh, you have to use like, what do they call it? A private, something list, a transparency list where you have to specify the kind of data that you collect from people, thereby encouraging more accountability and transparency on app developers. And that's been a big issue because now Apple is being challenged, not on data protection rules now, but on competition rules. And that's in Europe. We're seeing that's happening in Europe. But that's not my concern. My concern is when we see things like this, the use of permissions, we see different tracking technologies being deployed and being used, and also fusing this with dark patterns and people not really knowing to what extent they are being profiled, the third parties their data is being shared with and all of that. How should we start thinking about this and how would you react to that? I want a quick reaction, Uche.
I mean, the first reaction that I get is, it's promising to see that both parties are starting to make an effort, right? But as we all know, these type of agencies, like the people, the movers and shakers of the technology world, are not perfect, right? And I think now is the time to get ahead of regulations of group regulations, right? And just doing things just because, right? And encouraging more people or more Android, iOS, all of those places, right? Encouraging them to be more out of the norm, and more vigorous in how they are doing things, right? Because even though it's a current, battle that they're fighting, right? They're taking actionable steps to sort of do their parts, right? And even though that they are still, in some of those spaces, right, there's still sections where, of course, privacy is still being breached, data is still being shared. Everybody hears the rumors around Facebook and Apple and everything that they're doing. And they are still the ones that are coming out to say, we are making efforts to, curb data sharing and all of that, right? It's like they're doing one thing and they're saying another thing, right? So it's very confusing. And this because these are global companies, right? And these are global regulations. And it's so very hard to track. These companies and to hold them accountable for what they're doing and the laws that they're setting, because they're literally setting rules and laws that apply to the global population, right? So when you think about it, it's very, very ridiculous that our whole experience with technology literally lies in the hands of, I don't know, about 5 people. You look at the big tech and you look at FANG companies, right? They are the ones that are making these decisions, right? They are the ones whose platforms are taking the most of our data, right? So it's something that obviously takes my nerve, and trying to, even with all of the regulations that are being made, right? You still see places where companies are trying to override these regulations, and they're trying to rename some of their content privacy or whatever they are doing, right? And they're trying to rename it and they're trying to reframe it in ways that they bypass even iOS regulations and Android regulations, right? So they can get launched, which is why people, because at the end of the day, right, when they bypass bypass things like this, it also falls to Apple, right? Because they've set these rules, and it falls to iOS and Android OS, right? And all of the operating software. Because they set these rules, and people are still, manipulating their own rules, right? So it just goes enough to show you that, now really is the time to get ahead of regulations, right? And try to track all of these things as best as we can.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, I saw an headline, I'm not sure it was yesterday or 2 days ago, that reads like Apple and Google are the biggest privacy regulator. And what the person was trying to say is that, so recently Google announced that they are canceling third-party cookies. And Apple announced the privacy label thing. I think maybe that's taking effect already. So, and the conclusion of the writer was that those two moves announced by those two players has actually had more radical effects on the internet's privacy online than even what the regulation has been trying to do for a number of years. Whether that is true or not, that's a different debate. But Kelechi, I want to get your reaction to that. Permissions, trackers, and all sorts. Yeah, your quick reaction, please.
Okay, I'll make it quick because I think that Uche has actually said like a lot already, and I'm tempted to just support the motion, right? But but I think that it would be good to maybe like he said and like you said as well, for us to. It's good that we are now becoming very much aware of what's going on, and we are now interested in trying to make a case for it. But then it would be good for us for the companies, right, to get ahead of maybe now regulators as well, understanding exactly what could be necessary and what couldn't be necessary in the long term, and what kind of permissions they need to the way they need to now frame permission so much that we are able to understand exactly what we're giving out and what we're not. And then the way I say it now is, of course, I don't think companies started out with the idea of, we're going to grow so big and we're going to have people's data and we're going to be able to sell it or not sell it or use it or not use it, right? It's just how, user engagement on the product evolved into we now wanting to share, we now wanting to deal. And of course, it's just psychology or product psychology for us. But I think that it will be good for us, or as we are creating more awareness, it will be good for us for companies to just stay on top of that and still try to ensure that they are able to break down in the barest way possible what kind of information we are sharing, how they are trying to use or not use our information, make it very visible for us to be able to delete our accounts where we think we don't want to. Because I think there was a time where, I don't know if it was Facebook, where they brought out like a feature that said that, you can write out in the event that digital assets. So where you have your pictures on Facebook, for instance, and then someone now dies, where do those pictures go to? Who uses them? Like, how do you will your assets now to, a different person? And that's something that has to also do with, data, where I don't give my data out or share it with Facebook. And then once I am no more on this earth, Facebook has rights to everything. They can use my data for whatever they need to do. So I think that, back to the point, just them staying on top of, what's going on with respect to our data, and then trying to break it down for us so we understand exactly what it is being used for. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm sure legacy, digital will, and digital legacy is something Victoria might want to speak to, because I know she's done a research in that space. But before we do that, before we come back to you, Victoria, and Uche and Kelechi, I'm going to come back to you again around the role of ethics in all of this. We're going to speak to that much later. But before we get to that, Victoria, next. Yeah. Victoria, you're muted.
Okay, I didn't actually hear what you said. The line was breaking for some reason, but I think I understand what I'm doing here. So it's time to play a game. Let's play a game. We've been doing serious. I won't even call it serious talk since. But now let's play a game. So we'll provide a definition of a term. And when we provide the definition, you give us the answer. So we just give you a brief description. For example, the code you get on your phone from the internet, maybe you want to do a bank transaction on the internet, you want to use your debit card, the OTP that you get, the answer, two-factor authentication. So now to the question or the description before you give your answer. Next slide, please. So when you used to take a picture back in the old days, like take a picture, people like who are like ancient of days that are listening to us, not young people like me. If you wanted to know what it was, which great aunt was in the shot, or when it was taken, you had to scribble notes on the back after you got them from the developers. These days, it handles the job. Whether we like it or not, it exists all around us. This document I'm typing into has it, the date, the author, the file, the location, version, owner, content, statistics. We call that the properties your images have. The location and other things. If you are if you let's just make this very practical. If you watch detective movies like I spend all my time doing, when there's like a kidnapping and they send proof of life and they give it to their tech guy who doesn't use the mouse when typing on a system, just keyboard only. They give it to the tech guy, and the tech guy is like checking the picture for properties around the picture, like to find out more about where the picture came from. So he's looking at maybe location, he's looking at the type of picture and different properties that your picture carries along with it when it's taken. So what are we talking about? What is it? They describe it data as data, like it gives you data about data because picture is data. So I am something, I give you data about data. What am I?
You can share your response in the chat box, please. Should we get more responses? Yeah, we have one answer already. All right, I guess we'll just go with that. What's the answer?
Metadata. Thank you very much, Francis. Yes, Francis, you got it right. Metadata describes other data. It provides information about a certain item's content. For example, an image may include metadata that describes how large the picture is, the color depth, the image resolution, when the image was created, and other data. A text document metadata may contain information about how long the document is, who the author is, when the document was written, and a short summary of the document. Over to you, Ridwan.
Thank you, Victoria, and thank you for that. I mean, maybe something I'm going to add to that is that in time past, metadata is actually not considered personal data, but increasingly we are seeing more data protection law include it as personal data. And that's also because if you consider the definition of personal data to include even data that are capable of indirectly identifying an individual. So when you aggregate, exactly, when you aggregate metadata, there's a very good chance that you might be identified. You might be identified by the end of the day. So yeah, that's that about that. Uche Kelechi, I'm going to come to you now. What's your role? Sorry, Victoria, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to ask that some phones now have the option of turning off metadata with pictures.
Yeah, we're beginning to see how increasingly how important it is. Yes. We're beginning to see how important that is.
My phone does it. Okay, do you want to remove
the metadata, strip it off? Yeah. I know we also shared the tool here, maybe the last time we talked about how you can use the tool to actually strip a document of its metadata as well. Yeah, thanks for that. All right. Uche, yeah, Uche and Kelechi, what's the role of ethics in all of this? Kelechi, do you want to go first?
Okay, sure.
Okay, I was thinking Uche would go first, but then okay, so I think the role of ethics really boils down to, what are like the laid down rules, or what are we being compliant with, right? And what is the company being compliant with? And speaking from the perspective of, being a product manager or being a product designer or the product team per se, right? I would say that as much as we're taking responsibility for whatever it is that we put out there, it still boils down to, the employer-employee kind of relationship and that liability as well. So I believe that companies, organizations now have to be more compliant or be more intentional. I'm not trying to find a different way, trying to describe black as gray black or blue black just because they don't want to call it black, for instance, or give a different name to whatever they're trying to do just to avoid being compliant with certain regulations or even being ahead. So I think that it has to do with, there be more intentionality per se, and then more awareness as well on really what's going on, and then how users are able to identify dark patterns itself. And I believe that once we're able to do that, it will really compel companies, organizations to really try to be more compliant with what's going on, and then try to be ethical in their activities and then what they do, or what kind of products they put out, and the kind of features they get to hide or not hide when they push out products. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for that. Uche?
Yeah, I concur with everything she said. But the truth is also, like, technology isn't neutral, right? There's always going to be, it's not, she's right, it's not black and white, right? But it's still not neutral, right? It's, we're the fact that we're talking about this alone, right, is something that is very important, right? There's always going to be, as long as it's aided by human, as long as it's aided by, human factors, right? There's always going to be a one side to it, because we're not just building, technology isn't just building itself right now. There's that human part to it, right? And I believe that design artifacts have politics, right? And when we're neutral or dismissive of those politics, we are avoiding the responsibility we have and the role we play as creators, right? And from a design perspective, right, every object that we make exists in the future. We are making a statement when we design, like which features are desirable or undesirable. Like, how are we defining our values, right? How do we build an ethical core to our work, right? It requires effort, right? It takes morals, right? It takes awareness and reflection of the choices that we make and the impact of those choices, right? And some of the things that, I like to practice, or I like to ask myself when I'm designing, right? Just to test my work ethically and test the impact of my work. It's simple questions like, what if everyone did what I'm about to do, right? Would the world be a better place, or would it be worse with it? Am I treating people as ends or as a means, right? For designers, it's about considering the role of a user in your system, right? Are you treating them as individuals with goals more important than your own? And this is what it means to be data-driven, to be a data-driven designer, right? I also asked, like, am I maximizing happiness for the greatest number of people? What are the consequences and the impacts of our choices? How do we assess or how do we measure happiness, right? It's a perspective that helps grounds us in the impact of our work. And then finally, would I be happy for what I'm about to do or what I'm doing to be published in the papers tomorrow? Is this something that I would be proud to say, I did this, I contributed to this, I want my name associated with this particular thing, essentially, how does your work speak for you, and how does it reflect who you are as a person? Because, every human being on this planet is obligated to do our best and to leave the planet in a better shape than we found it, right? Designers and product managers and product people and developers and companies, working in tech, we don't get to opt out from that reality. As a human being, it's a basic act that, the planet is, requesting from you, and essentially all of us working in tech and all of us working in these fields, we are hired for our expertise, right? We are hired for our opinion, right? It's important to know that saying no is actually a huge design skill. Asking why is a design skill. Listening to criticism and it's also a design skill. Knowing your audience and having empathy and being part of the community, engaging in your own self-reflection. These are how we, think about ethics in the role that, it plays in dark patterns and in the role that we play as designers, right? I know that it comes with a lot of risks. People are trying to keep their jobs, people are trying to keep hierarchy in their workspace, but asking why and saying no and like putting your own opinion, is very important because that's literally what you're hired for. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for that very brilliant submission. And Amanda, Victoria, I'm going to come to you now. What's your take on the role of ethics? I mean, we've talked about how law is inadequate, and now we have ethics on the other side of things. I mean, which is literally trying to do good. So, what's the role of ethics in all of this to you? And I'm going to start with you, Victoria. You're on mute. All right. I think Victoria is struggling to hear us very well. Amanda, do you want to say something about what do you think is the role of ethics here?
I will put it in this way. We need to do good at the end of the day. So businesses are supposed to develop products and services that, in as much as they bring money from a commercial perspective, they also do not do harm. So at the end of the day, I believe what just needs to happen is adopting a human rights-based approach when developing any form of product. Purely because if you adopt a human rights-based approach, you're looking at it from a more central perspective. And I say this because when you look at it ethically, there can be a lot of questions and a lot of doubts about, okay, so is this an ethically, is this ethical? Is it not ethical? And then you get into all the debates that I did not fully enjoy when I did my first year of law school. But I think the best approach is to always adopt a human rights-based approach, also because that is, human rights are something that are internationally recognized. So it's always easy to go back to. That being said, you will have the question of harm. What is harm? So even if we look at it from an ethics perspective, I think answering the question of what is harm becomes very subjective, in as much as we can always say that yes is harm. If you slap me on the face, you can definitely see that you have harmed me in some way. But there are other instances where harm is harm to a particular type of group, and another community or group of people might not see it as harm. But I do believe at the end of the day, if we approach development from a ensuring that we ensure that we do not infringe on anyone's human right, then we will at least be able to start at some starting point. I know it's not the best answer, but I think this is a territory where developers are trying to develop products that help people at the end of the day. Sometimes they're not aware what that particular product will do or how it might harm. Sometimes they are aware. But yeah, we also do, as the consumers, we also do want those products. And how do we ensure that harm doesn't occur at the, maybe 3 years down the line or whatever? That might be something that is quite difficult to answer. So I would say go with the human rights-based approach. And if it works, at the end of the day, I hope we won't be having many more discussions about, issues such as deception in product design. Thanks, Ridwan.
All right. Victoria, you can speak now. Okay. Okay. While we await that, I know the quiz is meant to go live right now, but we're actually struggling with the platform where we host it. I don't know why that is the case, but I'm sure by the next episode, the quiz will be back. And of course, the gift for whoever wins also will be there. We were able to do that this week, and I apologize for that. Victoria, I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, then also I'm throwing this open to anyone listening. If you want to add one or two things to the conversation here, please just raise your hand so you can we can take you, please. All right, I think Victoria is struggling with her network, but while at that, I'm just going to talk through what we have this week for on Quick and Dirty. Essentially, this reads when you think personal data, think of the humans behind it. And this is a very popular saying from Paltwash. Anyone who is familiar with Paltwash, Privacy Matters on Twitter would probably be familiar with this particular saying of his. And the hashtag we're using this week, it's got so for me, which is something quite popular right now on the Nigerian Twitter space. So essentially what we're saying here is when we sometimes we get lost in conversation or we get lost in discourse when we say personal data and personal data. And sometimes we forget it's really about people. So when you're thinking about the danger, when you're thinking about the risk, when you're thinking about the harm, when you're designing the products, when you're designing the services, and it has to do with personal data, just think of individuals that are behind the data, those data. Even if you don't know their names, you don't know where they come from or whatever unique things that actually identify them, you don't know it. Just think about those risks could affect more people and could affect people in different ways. So when you're doing that, just think about humans. So I think that's that about for Quick and Dirty this week. So I'm going to go around and take just one last time for everyone before we wrap it up. And the question is, what should they do? And I want us to take that quickly. I mean, what should users do? Now we've been able to, paint the picture of how bad this is, the danger inherent in dark designs and all of that. So what should users do? And I'm going to start with you, Kelechi.
Okay, so I think that it would be good for users to be more aware. So I think it was Victoria that was talking about how if people feel like, oh, I don't have money right now, I don't have anything. What do they want to steal from me, right? And then because of that, we just feel like, oh, we can just do whatever, we can just sign up for whatever. Until you just keep storing your data and sharing your data till it becomes like a big deal and you really can't do anything about it. So I think that users are supposed to be, right now, it's good for users to be intentional, to be more aware, to attend events like this, so that they can hear examples of what's going on. And to see that it's fundamental right, true that, right? So you don't see that something that just, so this doesn't matter, but no, understand that even if it's just a day old or a 1-year-old baby, data of that baby is really important. It should not be just shared anyhow. So I think I'll just stop there and I'll allow the rest of the speakers to go on. Thank you.
Kelechi. Amanda?
I think if you can, as a user, try read what you're signing on for, if you can. And if you are able to sit in front of someone, try to sign up for something when you're sitting in front of someone. I think that's some of the ways that we can learn as users how to protect our data and to also know what exactly as a service is using our data for.
Oh, thank you, Amanda. Uche.
Yeah, I think plus one to everything that they've said so far. Just being more, I don't want to put all of the efforts on the users because there's only so much that we can do, and technology is advancing at a very increasing rate, right? And people are finding new ways to be more innovative with technology. So like users are constantly trying to catch up. I mean, people are trying to catch up with mobile user interfaces, right? Now we are introducing AR and VR and all these other realities that people are facing with, right? So it's too much to put it all on the user, but just trying to be more aware of the choices that you have. Trying to be more aware of the choices that you have and the choices that you can make with regards to how you interact with the increasing rate of technology. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Uche. Victor, I don't know if you can hear us now. what would you recommend users to do?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, finally. I think I heard that part. So I think users, as everyone has said, people should be more aware. But I think, as the last speaker said, there's very little, not very little, but there's just so much people can do when they don't know about things like this. Like before I got to know about dark patterns, I thought it was normal. I thought that's just how it's supposed to be. People are just selling their market. But if we can have these discussions more, like enlighten people more about dark patterns, then we can say, okay, there's something they can be aware of, there's something they can be careful about. But let's just assume people know dark patterns exist. There should be this, we should try to address the issue of this apathy towards privacy and apathy towards things like this. It's not a big deal. There's nothing there. I have nothing to hide. Or people should begin to care more about their own data. They should care about what happens to their data. So websites they sign up on, they should know that their email is stuck with those people forever, because they might not be able to unsubscribe ever again. People should just begin to use options like probably temporary emails generated randomly on one website like that to sign up for services, because now it's getting difficult to unsubscribe from office mail on those websites and things like that. People should just begin to exercise more care and more caution on the internet generally, not just dark patterns, but with everything you do, social media, sharing information, users should exercise a lot more caution when they interact on the internet.
All right, thank you. Do you want to take the privacy field, please, quickly? We're wrapping up.
We are GDPR and NDPR compliant or certified. That's another one that we get to see sometimes. Like NITDA is now issuing out NDPR compliance certificate. I think people do it because they submit audit reports and then they are featured on the NITDA performance report, and all of a sudden they are NDPR compliant. Again, you can check. People who don't have privacy notices are saying they are NDPR compliant. All these things are just posturing and they may not be very true. So when you see we are GDPR and NDPR compliant, the one thing I've seen from experience is that you need to check again. There are red flags, massive red flags with organizations. We're not saying nobody can be GDPR or NDPR compliant, but we're saying when a lot of times when it is the signpost of the organization, it's a red flag because they are not even getting basic things right. And GDPR, NITDA is not issuing any compliance certificate. They don't issue any certifications. NITDA is not issuing any certification. There is no official GDPR certification from a regulator that people can look at and say, yes, this organization is perfect. So when we see things like that, it's a red flag, in my own opinion, because people posture is something they do on the internet. It's something that is very common with LinkedIn and other things, organizational posturing, and it's a privacy field.
All right.
What do you think, Ridwan?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think just like you rightly put it, it's more of posturing than what actually obtains. And I think the last thing for today is the recommended tool, which is Tutanota. It's an email service provider that ensures security, end-to-end design. It takes into consideration privacy by design. And of course, it guarantees encryption before sending out email. Tutanota is available on Apple, Android, F-Droid, Windows, and Linux. And we also mentioned some other alternative like service providers like Unseen and Mail Fence. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Kelechi. Thank you, Uche. Thank you, Victoria, for joining us this week. And I hope we can call you some other time. Thank you, Amanda, as well. Some other time you would also be able to respond. Thank you, everyone who joined. I managed to stay to the end of the event today. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, always nice time having you around. Thank you.
Thank you
everyone.
too.
It was a great chat.